bars hibernate, solar activate, falcon flask and silver stripe and typo 3 flow. Agave pixie has our MVC, code ignites a lithium and PRADO. Raphael, Bobo, Bottle and Tornado, Django, Cherry Pie, and WSGI, Class, Hammer, Web, Sphere, Red Beam, Turbo Gears, Albatross, Aquarium, Selenium, Web Pie.
We're gonna build a framework, 'cause we wanna use one, let's go wanna choose one. We're gonna build a framework, we didn't like the others, so we'll rise another.
Sitecore, Tapestry, Maverick and JSP, Barracuda, Akarama, Groovy on Grails, Intercal on Interstate, Cascade and Hibernate, JDBC, Ruby on Rails, Jasmine, Doctrine, Java Forms Engine, Active Record D3, Dapper and Velocity, Time Leaf, Top Link, Pyramid, Rethink, Aura, Rico, Midori and Mojito.
We're gonna build a framework, 'cause we wanna use one, let's go wanna choose one. We're gonna build a framework, we didn't like the others, so we'll rise another.
Site Mesh, Cymbeline, Enterprise, Java Beans, Hug, Grok, Boost, Click, anything by Telerik, Rango, Dojo, LLBO, Gen Pro, Carbonado, Seaside, Pylons and Pyroxide. Fusebox, Flight Flex, Service Stack, Silex, Carbon, Coco, Amble and Giotto, Banshee, Symphony, Laravel, Fat Free, Macapeka, Hobo, Cuba and Rialto.
We're gonna build a framework, 'cause we wanna use one, let's go wanna choose one. We're gonna build a framework, we didn't like the others, so we'll rise another.
Open Rest and Nancy, ASP.NET, MVC, Kendo, Zen, ODBC and Tempo, Java Server Faces, Entity Spaces, Cappuccino, SpecFlow, Polymer, JDO, Google Web Toolkit, no need to learn JavaScript, JDK, Code Away, what else do I have to say?
We're gonna build a framework, 'cause we wanna use one, let's go wanna choose one. We're gonna build a framework, we didn't like the others, so we'll rise another.
Prototype, boilerplate, jQuery, animate, mustache, tempo, ionic and Allegro, bootstrap, backbone, running on an iPhone, mobile app going live, built-in HTML5, Angular, Scriptaculous, React, Redux, Knockout, Ember, does anyone remember? Just like in the browser wars, I explore in Netscape 4, Lodash versus underscore, and I can't take it anymore.
We're gonna build a framework, 'cause we wanna use one, let's go wanna choose one. We're gonna build a framework, we didn't like the others, so we'll rise another. We're gonna build a framework, 'cause we wanna use one, let's go wanna choose one. We're gonna build a framework, we didn't like the others, so we'll rise another.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 17, use flat screens. If I could offer you only one tip for the future, flat screens would be it. The benefits of flat screens have been proved in Hollywood, whereas the rest of my advice has no basis more reliable than my own meandering experience. I will dispense this advice now. Enjoy the confidence and optimism of greenfield projects. Oh, never mind. You'll not appreciate the confidence and optimism of greenfield till things start going wrong. But trust me, when you finally ship, you'll look back at the code you wrote and recall in a way you can't grasp now how simple everything seemed and how productive you really were. Your code is not as bad as you imagine. Don't worry about changing database providers, or worry, but know that every company who used an ORM in case they needed to switch databases never actually did it. The real problems in your projects are the dependencies you can't control. The engineer who unexpectedly leaves your team at 4 p.m. on some idle Tuesday. Learn one thing every day that scares you. Optimize. Don't reformat other people's code bases. Don't put up with people who reformat yours. Rebase. Don't get obsessed with frameworks. Sometimes they help, sometimes they hurt. It's the user experience that matters, and the user doesn't care how you created it. Remember the retweets you receive, forget the flame bait. If you succeed in doing this, tell me how. Keep your old hard drives. Throw away your old network cards. Refactor. Don't feel guilty if you don't understand F#. Some of the most productive junior developers I've worked with didn't know F#. Some of the best systems architects I know still don't. Write plenty of tests. Be kind to your keys. You'll miss them when they're gone. Maybe you have a degree, maybe you don't. Maybe you have an open source project, maybe you don't. Maybe you wrote code that flew on the space shuttle. Maybe you worked on Microsoft SharePoint. Whatever you do, keep improving, and don't worry where your next gig's coming from. There's a big world out there, and they're always gonna need good developers. Look after your brain. Don't burn out. Never be scared to take a break. It is the most powerful computer you will ever own. Launch. Even if you have no users but your own QA team. Have a plan, even if you choose not to follow it. Do not read the comments on YouTube. They will only make you feel angry. Cache your package dependencies. You never know when they'll be gone for good. Read your log files. They're your best source of information and the first place you'll notice if something's starting to go wrong. Understand that languages come and go, and it's the underlying patterns that really matter. Work hard to fill the gaps in your knowledge, because the wiser you get, the more you'll regret the things you didn't know when you were young. Code in 8.6 assembler once, but stop before it makes you smug. Code in Visual Basic once, but stop before it makes you stupid. Read. Accept certain inalienable truths. Your code has bugs, you will miss your deadlines, and you too might end up in management. And when you do, you'll fantasize that back when you were a developer, code was bug-free, deadlines were met, and developers tuned their database indexes. Tune your database indexes. Don't deploy your code without testing it. Maybe you have a QA team, maybe you have integration tests. You never know when either one might miss something. Don't mess too much with your user interface, or by the time you ship, it will look like a karaoke booth. Be grateful for open source, but be careful whose code you run. Sharing code is noble, but there's more to it than taking bits of your project's folder, putting a README file on them, and hoping if you upload it to GitHub, someone else will come along and fix all your problems. But trust me, on the flat screens.
W3C, RFC, a Jira ticket and a style guide. I deploy with FTP. I run it all on the client side. Don't need Ruby, don't need Rails. Ain't nothing running on my stack. I'm hardwired for web scale. Yeah, I'm gonna bring the 90s
Hello, NDC. How are you all doing out there? And welcome to the last session before the party, which is always the one where I know a couple of you are like, come on, get the thing done, then we can go and have the beers and stuff. So thank you for coming to WhatsApp, Web3, and Wordle, Evolving a Digital Society. Now, we're going to start off with a nice, easy, trivial question. We're not going to get into anything too deep. Is internet access a fundamental human right? On February the 28th this year, this guy wrote a letter to this guy. Does anyone know who these people are? The one on the left, this is Mikhailo Fedorov. He is the vice prime minister, the deputy prime minister of Ukraine. He's also the Ukrainian Minister for Digital Transformation. He ran the digital campaign that President Zelensky ran when he was elected. And the guy on the right is Goran Marby, who is the chief executive and president of ICANN, the Internet Consortium for Assigned Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. And if you have read the news at all this year, one, I'm sorry. There is therapy, we will drink afterwards. But there is a lot of very heavy shit going on. The content of this letter on the 28th of February was basically Mr. Fedorov saying to Mr. Marby, please could you help us by the following sanctions targeting the Russian Federation's access to the internet? Could you revoke the domains RU, FAR, and SU, which is the Soviet Union? Did you know the Soviet Union had a top-level domain? Today I learned. Contribute to revoking the SSL certificates for all of the above-mentioned domains, and shut down the DNS root servers in St. Petersburg and Moscow. Now, I have been to Ukraine many, many times, and I have witnessed firsthand the digital transformation that was taking place there over the last few years, and it's quite astonishing. I've talked to startups there, I've been to tech hubs in Odessa and in Kiev, and I think the Ukrainian Minister for Digital Transformation sounds like somebody who knows what he's doing. At this time in the UK, we had a Minister for Digital Transformation who went to a meeting with Microsoft and asked them when they were going to ban the algorithms. So, I think Mikhailo Fedorov, one, knows exactly what he's asking for, and two, he probably knew that they were going to say no, because the reply came back very quickly from ICANN saying, we sympathize and you have our support, but we are not going to do the things that you asked for. ICANN has been built to ensure that the internet works, not for its coordination role to be used to stop it from working. ICANN is it's the closest thing the internet has to a police force. They're the people who allocate the domain names and they manage the top-level DNS root servers and this kind of stuff. But that wasn't the only letter that Mikhailo Fedorov sent in February. He also wrote a letter to these people. Now, you have probably never heard of these people. They don't own any servers. They don't own any cables. They don't own any mobile phone towers or infrastructure. And if they disappeared, the internet would stop working. Not immediately. The next couple of weeks, it would probably be fine. And then some of you might realize that you could no longer send email to certain companies who you deal with. Some websites would become unavailable and you're not entirely sure why. And eventually, the internet as we know it would cease to operate. Now, when we talk about connecting to the internet, we tend to think of this. There's a big cloud of magical data up in the sky, and we connect to it using little lines with arrows on the end. And we've all seen these kinds of diagrams. Devices connect to the internet. And for most of us, this is true, because we are very, very small, and we are very insignificant, and we have our phone and our tablet and our laptop, and we want to connect to the internet where the good stuff is. But if you are big, if you are a major European cable communications provider, if you are Microsoft, if you are Amazon, if you own a terabit cable that runs across the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, for example, you do not connect to the internet. You are the internet. You live in the cloud. That's where you do your thing. And the rest of us kind of rely on you to help us get stuff from here to here. If you own a lot of cable, you don't pay for internet access. What you do is you find your nearest internet exchange point, and you say, right, we're going to run our cable in there, and we're going to see who else has cable running in here, and then we are going to talk to them, and we are going to set up what are called peering agreements. And this is what ripe do in the UK is they facilitate those agreements. Amazon says to Microsoft, yeah, we'll carry your network if you carry ours. And then Telenor says, well, we got a bunch of cables, so we'll carry yours if you carry ours. So when I send you an email or we do a Zoom call or, you know, we're playing Far Cry or something, the packets that are connecting me to you are actually flowing through all of these companies, telecoms providers, academic research institutes, and they don't know about it. And they generally don't care about it because transparency is part of that peering agreement. That's like, yeah, anything you send us, we'll send out the other side. RIPE is one of 5 regional internet registries. RIPE NCC covers Europe and most of, well, as far east as the tips of Russia over there. There is ARIN, North America. There is LACNIC, which is Latin America and the Caribbean. There is AFRINIC, which covers Africa. And there is APNIC, Asia Pacific. And between them, they control pretty much, not control, they facilitate almost all of the internet traffic that exists anywhere in the world. And they sent a letter back to Mikhail Fedorov. He basically said, can you please cut Russia off the internet? And they sent back and said, no, we're not going to do that. And further, we believe internet number resource registrations should not be used as a means to enforce political outcomes. Doing so would have serious implications for the internet, not just in the Russian Federation, but in the rest of the world. So, can we cut somebody off the internet even if they're being really awful and we really, really want to? Probably not, because the 2 organizations who have the power to do that realize that would be an incredibly dangerous path to go down. So it would appear that internet access is a de facto right. But what about any kind of theoretical or legal basis for it? Well, Tim Berners-Lee, creator of the World Wide Web, is now campaigning on exactly this issue. He spoke to an event at the European Parliament late last year where he was outlining his vision for an internet where access to that internet is a guaranteed human right. We need governments, companies, civil society, citizens to work together now to create a future where internet access is understood and realized as a basic human right. So we've got ICANN saying we're not going to disconnect you. We've got RIPE NCC. We've got Tim Berners-Lee saying this. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, this goes back to 1948. And for some reason, they didn't put Wi-Fi access in it when they wrote it in 1948. But the people who drafted this were pretty clever, and they're like, stuff might change, you know? And so the articles that I think are applicable here, Article 19, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. And if you don't think that quite clinches it, there's Article 27.1. Everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts and share in scientific advancement and its benefits. So I think there is a pretty strong, both a de facto and a theoretical case for internet access being a human right. But what do we mean, internet access? What is this thing that we're arguing about, whether you have the right to it or not? Well, I think it would look something like this. I think it would be the right to connect to the network and be assigned an IP address for as long as you need one. If you transmit a properly formed and correctly addressed packet across the internet, and if your destination address exists, that packet will reach its destination. And if anybody else anywhere on the internet sends a properly formed packet that is correctly addressed to you, that packet will be delivered. And it logically follows on that if this is something we are going to try and enshrine as a right, nobody should be allowed to interfere with that traffic while it is in transit. Now, let's imagine for 1 second that the company who manage the highways decide they don't have enough money. They want to get in on this free market capitalism they've read about. And so they start shopping around and they're like, hey, I've got a good idea. Let's see if we can do some partnership deals. So the highways agency, they get a BMW and they say, hey, how much money will you give us to give all your BMW drivers extra speed limit? And BMW go, I don't know, €500 million? That sounds like it. Boom, there you go. BMWs can do 170. And then the Audi people are like, hey, we'll do that. We'll pay double what they paid. Audi gets 170. Ford come along. They're like, well, 150. Toyota are like, well, we'll pay a little bit, but our cars don't go that fast, so 90K is probably good enough for us. And then just to make this look special, They say, everyone else, 50 kilometers an hour, that's your limit. And then finally, the petrogas chemical companies come along and they're like, yeah, while we're doing this, we'll give you a bunch of money if you ban electric cars, because they're really putting a dent in our profits. And there it is. We have a wonderful free market capitalist freeway system where if you want to go really, really fast, you have to buy a BMW and put petrol in it, because the people who sell the BMWs and the people who sell the petrol control the people who control the speed limits. This sounds like a nightmare, right? There are companies everywhere who want to do this to the internet right now. In the United States, most domestic broadband access is dominated by 4 huge companies: Comcast, AT&T, Verizon, Charter Communications. And there are large parts of the US where you do not have a choice. If you live in a Comcast neighborhood or a Comcast district, you have Comcast or you have dial-up. That's it. There is no free market capitalism. There is de facto monopoly capitalism at work here. And 2007, a bunch of folks in the US who were paying for internet access through Comcast, they noticed that some of their traffic was not going as fast as it should. Some files they were downloading from a pirate website they found. And they complained to the Federal Communications Commission, and they said, we are paying for 26 megabits, and we're not getting it. And the FCC, which is the branch of the United States government that administers communications, radio, wireless, and eventually the internet, they turned around to Comcast and they said, you need to stop throttling your users' traffic. That is illegal. And Comcast said, all right, yep, fine, whatever you say, FCC. They took the throttles off, they turned around, and they sued the government. And they said, you do not have permission or authority to tell us what to do. Now, this dragged on for a couple of years. It was the first time that this issue of network neutrality had been placed before a court of law. And the DC Circuit Court of Appeal had actually ruled in favor of Comcast here. They'd said, we're not entirely sure that the FCC has jurisdiction over network neutrality. So the FCC turned around and went, right, let's get it. The US Open Internet Order 2010 codifies as absolute rights, 1, transparency. Network providers will carry traffic to one end to the other, and they will not mess with it in transit. They are not allowed to block ports, they are not allowed to block services, and they are not allowed to discriminate by, for example, making Disney Plus go faster than Netflix because Disney gave them a big old, cashback hander. This was struck down by the Supreme Court as being unconstitutional. They said the FCC did not have the right to interfere with glorious free market capitalism. And that basically, 2014, the day of that judgment, was the day that network neutrality died in the United States of America. Fortunately, we are not in the United States of America, because the rest of the world looked at it and went, that's really bad. Like, did you see, could that happen here? And the government of the European Union, the EU Parliament, kind of kicked into gear and went, we are going to draft and publish the EU Open Internet Regulation, which says you have transparency. Your internet provider is not allowed to block your traffic, they are not allowed to interfere with it, and they are not allowed to unreasonably discriminate, and that was passed. That is now law in the EU and the European Economic Area. Bizarrely, it is one of the few bits of European law that will still apply in the UK after Brexit, because we thought of it first. The UK had an Internet Transparency Act in 2010, which actually was the basis for the European one. Now, I've been on the internet a long time, and I think network neutrality is really important, and it's something we should all care about. But when you talk to normal people and normal humans, they're like, what network? Nah. And I'm like, well, what do you think matters? And they're like, I like shopping and films and music and talking to my friends and memes and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, but that all runs on the internet. And the reason it runs on the internet is because we invented the World Wide Web. And I've been on the web since the web had a logo that looked like this, designed by Robert Callio in 1990. And I love the web. I loved building websites when I first started. I love building websites today. And one of the things that made me fall in love with the web was it is such a wonderful platform to work on. If you try and write a program on a computer using C, to pick an example, there we go, standard IO, int main, printf, hello world, return 0, and then you're like, okay, please run it. And the computer goes, ha ha, human, you are stupid. You forgot one semicolon, and therefore your whole program is wrong, and your species is meaningless, and we will take over. And you're like, I hate programming. Computers suck. I don't want to do this anymore. And you go and work in a bank or something. But browsers, no, browsers are friendly. You can feed a browser. Let's make a web page. So we're gonna write a web page, and we know a little bit about HTML. We're like, well, pages they have a head, and so if they got a head, they probably have a face, because that makes sense. So this is Dylan's page, and then I got a body because there's a head, and then there's a body, and then I got a heading 1. Welcome to my web page. That's fine. And font, color equals red, because I want red text so that it's multimedia and interactive. And I'm going to put a line break, and font color blue. So look, I got red and I got blue. And I'm going to put an image on here. Here's my cat. This is Mac. Image source equals cat. Name is Mac, because that's his name. And he likes snacks, so likes equals snack. And then I'm going to close the body. And then if it's got a head and a body, it probably needs feet, right? So I'm going to have feet, and then I'm going to close it. And I'm in a hurry because I'm really excited. I want to see, so I accidentally close HTLM instead of HTML. Get your phone out and scan that QR code. That works. There's no syntax error. Your browser doesn't go invalid markup at line 0. It's like, yeah, all right, well, I understand most of this. This is what renders. This is what that thing looks like, because browsers are a wonderful example of something called Postel's law. This is John Postel. John wrote the specification for TCP/IP, which is the transport layer that drives most of the internet. And Postel's law says, be conservative in what you send and be liberal in what you accept. If you are sending data to another system, don't send weirdo data to prove how impressive you are. And if you are receiving data from another system, be nice. Do the best thing you can. Try your best to work out, okay, this isn't exactly 100% spec compliant, but I can see what they're trying to do here, so let's assume that's what they're trying to do. Now, there is a wonderful example of this principle in real life, which has nothing to do with the internet and technology. In 1975, the United States and the Soviet Union launched a joint space mission, Apollo-Soyuz. They were going to launch a Soyuz capsule from Baikonur, which is in what's now Kazakhstan, launch an Apollo capsule from Florida. They were going to rendezvous in orbit, and the commanders were going to share a historic handshake through the airlock. And one of the protocols for this mission, they had a whole bunch of problems. Nothing was compatible. Different electrical systems, different units, because Soviet Union used the metric system, and America still went to space in feet and inches and foot-pounds of torque, apparently. And they had a language barrier, because the cosmonauts all spoke Russian, and the Americans, the astronauts, they all spoke English. And they decided early on the best way to avoid misunderstandings is the Americans had to speak Russian, and the Russians had to reply in English. So you were always speaking the language that you'd just done the 3-month crash course in, and you were always listening to the reply in the language you grew up with. Because the potential for misunderstanding, this is the historic handshake. This is Colonel Tom Stafford and the Soviet commander, Alexei Leonov. There is no way Alexei Leonov is going to know an English word that Tom Stafford has never heard before, and vice versa. And so the protocol, as a side effect, meant they had to be conservative in what they were sending, because they only had 3 months' worth of crash course vocabulary, and they were doing their best to be as tolerant and as patient as an understanding as they could be. And so when I was, sat there bashing away on Internet Explorer version 2 and trying to figure out how HTML worked, this is me, I'm Tom Stafford trying to speak Russian, and the browser is being Alexei Leonov going, yeah, that's nonsense, but I think I know what you're getting at. Now, this principle of being conservative in what you send and liberal in what you accept. There have been points in the history of the web where people were not conservative in what they did. There were websites everywhere that even to get the homepage to load, you had to install this plugin and that plugin and this thing and Flash and Macromedia and Shockwave and this Java applet and all this weird crap that doesn't work anymore. But get your phone out again and go to this URL. Now, how many of you all here, is there anyone in the room who was born after Jar Jar Binks was a thing? Like anyone here who's like, 20, 21, yeah, we got a couple of hands. So the code to this website is older than you, because I wrote this site in 1997 when I was an undergraduate at university, and I kind of played around with it for a year, and then I got bored. And the site looks like this. It's my collection of 3D models of Star Wars spaceships, because I was a really cool guy who, and I haven't touched the code. I have not modified anything. If you go to that URL right now, you are looking at HTML that I wrote in TextPad in 1997. It looks like this. It still works. And the reason it still works on devices that did not even exist when I wrote it is I didn't use Flash. I didn't use plugins. I didn't use weird extensions and hacks. I was like, I'm just going to do this with the HTML that kind of the browsers support natively. I loved making websites in the 90s because you could do stuff like this that, yeah, now it looks kind of a little bit quaint and quirky. We'd never done anything like that before. And I love building websites today because here in 2022, browsers are awesome. Like, you can plug a MIDI piano into your web browser and use it to do things in JavaScript. We've got 3D rendering. We've got camera access. We've got microphone access. We've got an accelerometer API, so you can build a web page that knows if you've dropped it on the floor. How awesome is this as a platform? The problem is there are two fundamental frustrations. As a developer, I love the web. As a consumer, as a creator, as somebody who lives and breathes and does business on the web, it kind of sucks. And that's because of two things I think they didn't really cover very well when we designed the standards that run the web: money and identity. Now, it's not that they didn't think about it. The people who created HTML and HTTP, they put in username, password authentication. They put in web authenticate headers. If you have a look at the original spec for the Hypertext Transfer Protocol version 1.1, June 1999, this is 1 month after Jar Jar, and they've got this, code 402, payment required, reserved for future use. Well, it's been 23 years, folks. When are you going to do something with it? Now, fundamentally, I think there are three models of commerce that exist on the web, and two of them we've pretty much got right. The first is mail order. You use the web, you browse the catalog, you add to basket, you put in your MasterCard number, and the next day you get a brown package from Amazon Cardboard Santa, and you're like, woo, and you open it, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna order more stuff. Anyone ever drunk Amazon where you buy things you don't remember buying, and then stuff arrives at your house, you're like, oh, drunk me bought me presents, this is great. But, we had mail order before. You could order things over the phone or by fax or by writing letters. So this was just taking an existing model of commerce and transplanting it onto a new platform. And then we have downloads, where it's, have you really bought anything? Like, you've got a license and you've got a stream of bits. But yesterday you didn't have the movie, and now you've given them a little bit of money and you've downloaded a file, and now you've got the movie, so you can watch the movie. And we, as a society, have mostly become pretty comfortable with that. We can buy music, we can buy media, we can buy ebooks, and you're not getting anything physical, but you then have something you didn't have yesterday. But then there's the applications where the content is the product, is the platform. News, media, the kind of things where you're not using a website to buy anything. You're using the website because you want what's on the website. And this is where I think the modern models of web commerce are letting everyone down badly. Used to be, you want to publish a newspaper, you're like, right, let's see if we can make this thing work. I'm going to buy a load of paper and ink and all that kind of stuff. And I need something people want to read, so I'm going to hire journalists, and I will pay them by the word, or I will give them a salary. They will give me stories. I put the stories in my newspaper. People buy the newspaper to read the story. And that's cool, because people are happy paying $1 or €1 for a newspaper. I give you this, you give me that, and now I have this thing. I can read it. At the end of the day, they throw it away. There's no concept of investing in newspapers and collecting them, but it was a transaction that made sense. And then you can go to the businesses in your area. You can be like, hey, I got 500 people a day reading my paper. You want to sell your lawnmowers? You got a sale coming up? And advertising is born. People start selling, secondhand. They got a piano they don't want, all this kind of stuff. And slowly this model builds up where it's all, to some extent, mutually supportive. And it works. And the people who work are getting paid for their work. Now, let's talk about Wordle. Towards the end of last year, we started seeing little yellow and green squares appearing on people's Twitter feeds and WhatsApps and all these kinds of things. Now, Wordle was beautiful. Wordle was not a product. Wordle was not a startup. Wordle was not created with the intention of monetizing it to leverage exponential growth. Wordle was a gift. A guy called Josh Wardle, who, if any of you remember a thing called The Button, this was a Reddit project. He put a button on the internet, and if the button didn't get pressed for a minute, the game was over. So random people had to arrive on this page every minute and press the button. The button ran for 3.5 months, because that's how long it takes the internet to get bored of pushing a button. And the place thing, /r/place on Reddit, that was Josh Wardle as well. And he created this as a gift for his partner who loved word games. And he started circulating it just by word of mouth, friends of friends. And it was actually somebody on Twitter just came up with this idea of using emoji to communicate their game today. And Josh Wardle saw it and went, hey, that's brilliant. I'm going to put that in the game. He added a share button. And before long, by January this year, there were 2 million people every day playing Wordle. How many is 2? Is 2 million a lot? Anyone know the population of Oslo? 1 million. So that's 2 Oslos every day are playing Wordle. 2 million is a lot. If you sell 2 million records, you get 2 platinum discs. If 2 million people went to see your movie on its opening weekend, you would smash the world box office record by a factor of 10. 2 million is a load of people. So how much money does it cost to serve Wordle to 2 million people? Well, this is Wordle, or this was Wordle before the New York Times bought it and screwed it up. It was an HTML page that was 2 kilobytes. It was a JavaScript file of about 188K. That's the whole game, including all of the words and all of the allowable guesses. 7 years worth of daily Wordle games in that one JavaScript file. The Wordle logo, that's not even part of the game. That's just there. So when you add it to your home screen, you get a nice little button to click on, and 3 kilobytes of CSS. So the whole thing is less than 200K for 7 years. Now, Wordle is a web component. It downloads onto your phone once, and then you can play it forever. Doesn't phone home. No tracking, no cookies, no nothing. Let's see, how much is it going to cost? So we want to serve that to these 2 million people who are playing every day. So we're going to go over to AWS, and we can get 9 cents a gigabyte on outbound transfer from an S3 bucket. So let's come on, Bart, let's do the math. We got 9 cents a gigabyte. That's that per megabyte, that per kilobyte, 200 kilobytes for the game. That much money per player times 2 million players. So giving Wordle to 2 million people is going to cost us $36. And we're looking at that and going, well, I don't know if we have that kind of money for the most successful mobile game that the world has seen in years. What if everybody on the planet wanted to play Wordle? What if 8.5 billion people all suddenly had Android phones and they all tried to play it on the same day? That could cost us as much as $120,000. We're exposed here. We got to get out. We need to start covering. Now, let's imagine that instead of selling Wordle to the New York Times for an undisclosed 7-figure sum, Josh Wardle gave it to us. And he said, here you go, Wordle's yours now. Just you're allowed to charge a little bit of money, but run it as a non-profit. Just, make enough that it's covering its own costs. So we're going to go and we're going to put it in the Microsoft store. And Wordle is going to cost $0.0000018. Now, you can't charge that amount of money, because actually Google's payment API does let you specify amounts in microns, which is a millionth of a dollar, but you can't charge someone. Anyone know what the lowest valued currency in the world is, other than the British pound, which is the lowest valued currency is the Iranian rial. And the official exchange rate is about 45,000 rials to the dollar. So that is about 1 Iranian rial. So we could say, all right, well, if we bill in rials, it's 1 instead of 0.000. And then we have to find a credit card company who will take Iranian rials. That's not easy to do either. So you know what? We're going to have to make a little bit of profit. Let's say it's $1. Let's say Wordle costs $1 for a year, and we roll out the payment system, and then it's like, right, now we need to, so we need a database of all our users so we can keep track of who's paid and who hasn't. And then, so we need someone to build the database. We'll hire a database developer for that. And we're going to need a security expert, because we've got their names and addresses, so GDPR. Well, we need to register a company so we can report on the taxes and the revenue, which means we need to hire an accountant, and we need confirmation emails, and then we got to find a relay provider to send the email through, and we got to design the email, so we hire a UX designer, and suddenly we're looking at this and thinking, $2 million is not going to be enough. Like, even if everyone paid us $1, we're going to run out of money halfway through our first year as a non-profit. And this is the little gulf of infeasibility. If you want to do stuff on the internet and give it away for free, that's easy. If you're prepared to spend, 50, maybe 100 euros or pounds or whatever, relatively small amounts of money for people who earn IT contracted day rates, then you can create wonderful things and give them to everybody, and it costs you a little bit, You can get almost free, not quite. And if you are prepared to sell something that costs 20, 30, 50, $100, 100 euros, those kinds of money, then the web is great. But in the middle, we have this dip. We have the dip of this thing is not worth charging for because we cannot make a profit out of charging that small an amount of money directly. And so the developers, the content creators, the artists who work in this space, they have to go, right, well, maybe we could put it in the App Store. Maybe Apple can distribute this for us because people are happy buying cheap things on their Apple iPhone. They're like, yeah, 99 cents, yeah, I'll take it, that's fine. And Apple's like, well, thank you, that's 30 cents. We can cut you off any time for no reason. We don't have to tell you why we did it. We don't like your face. Sorry, you don't have a company anymore. Get out, bye-bye. And developers go, we accept the terms and conditions because the alternative is worse than that. And there are sites that have been working really hard to try and create aggregated content models. Medium, Bandcamp, Patreon, YouTube, all these kind of sites, if your content does well on those platforms, you can make money. I know people who make hundreds of thousands of pounds a year from YouTube channels. I know bands who've funded albums through things like Patreon and Kickstarter and stuff. But if you just want to deal with your customer directly, you have a website with content on it that's worth something and you just want to get paid for what you do, the only option we've ever really come up with is advertising. And when I first started building websites, the way advertising worked was you had a website, and you lied about how many visitors you had, because how was anyone going to check? They had no idea. And you'd go to someone and be like, hey, I have 1,000 people a day looking at my website. Do you want to give me some money so I can promote your business? And your local neighborhood cheese shop would go, yeah, put the cheese banner on, and there we go. We got an advert, and I'm getting £50 a month or something, and they're getting people clicking on their advert. None of this is terribly sophisticated. And then we invent click tracking, so they can see how many requests they've got. And then the people who make the websites, they start getting a little bit bored, and they're like, I like the money, but I'm fed up of having to deal with the advertisers. And so brokers came in. And originally, the advertising brokers were people who you'd put a little snippet of code on your website, and they'd be like, right, when that code loads, their site's going to talk to our site, and we'll see which adverts we have in the roster right now, and we'll pick those, we'll design campaigns, we'll do all this kind of stuff manually. Today, when you go onto a website like this, a website driven by banner advertising, behind the scenes, what happens is that chunk of, if anyone was in Lemon's talk yesterday about making the web smaller, this is exactly the kind of stuff he's talking about. There's a couple of megabytes of JavaScript in there, and what it does, as I open that page, that JavaScript goes, roll up, roll up, roll up. We've got an exciting advertising opportunity. We've got a white British man. He's in Oslo for the next couple of days. He buys a lot of Lego and guitars, and he likes rock and roll music. He's into cats. He's got a bunch of stickers. Who wants to show him an advert for 50 cents? 40 cents, 30 cents, 20, 10, 9, 8, half a cent, a quarter, fraction, and eventually it gets down to some site going, we'll show sports bras to anybody for 0.001 euros. And so I get an advert for a sports bra. And I'm like, well, I think I'm probably okay without that. This is how it works. If you want to know how this actually works, go onto a website like Metro News, but not as you know it, because the news you know is true. And you try and open their web page, and you try and click somewhere, and you can't click anywhere because you have not accepted the cookie banner on there. So I'm going to go down. No, I'm not going to click the big green button. I'm going to click cookie settings. And I'm like, okay, so yeah, that makes sense. There, yeah. Okay, let's have a look at vendors. These are all the people who have signed up to the auction. 1,494 different brokers and conglomerates and media companies have all said, yes, we would like to participate in the selling Dylan sports bras on the internet game because we think that there's opportunities in there. You can go through and tick, no, but no one's going to do that, We are not going to do it. And the reason this exists, the reason the advertising broker knows that I am a white guy from England who likes guitars and cats and Lego and rock music and I'm going to be in Norway for a couple of days is because I have Googled things. And I've used Google Maps, and I use Gmail, and I use TripAdvisor and TripIt, and all these different sites. And every time I interact with any of these free products that I pay no money for, I am leaving a trail of digital footprints. And that trail, if you can get enough footprints, you know who somebody is. You know where they were. You know where they're going. You know what they're interested in. You know what to sell them. You can target advertising at that person. And this apparently is worth an enormous amount of money. Alphabet Holdings, which controls Google, is a $2 trillion company. And most of that comes from selling advertising and selling data used for targeted advertising. And the end result of all this is something that I'm starting to find a little bit worrying. The web, the internet, the stuff that makes all of this work is built on open protocols and cooperation. If I want to send you an email, I have an email client, you have an email server, SMTP is an open standard, we can do that. That's fine. It mostly works. But Gmail has 2 billion active accounts. There's 8 billion people on the planet. Like, that's the total head count of Homo sapiens right now. Google has, I'm not saying a quarter of the people in the world use Gmail, but that's the sort of numbers we're talking about. If Gmail decides that they don't like your face, that's 2 billion accounts that you can't email anymore. And I know about this because earlier in the year, Gmail decided they didn't like my face. I don't know why. They said lots of messages were identified as spam in the past. I've owned DylanBeattie.net for 25 years. I have never run a mailing list on it because I suck at marketing. I've had it locked down with domain key identification records and sender protection framework the entire time I've owned it. Nobody ever should have been able to send spam from DylanBeattie.net because the only emails that go from DylanBeattie.net are ones that I write. And I don't even type that fast. But this happened. And suddenly, I couldn't talk to customers. I couldn't send my girlfriend directions on how to get to the hotel where we're staying because anybody using Gmail, I was like, sorry, if you're on Google, you're going to have to go and check your junk mail folder because, I don't know, they just decided that they don't like me on this. Now, this centralization of open standards away from, open standards and towards monolithic providers. I know people who can't email Microsoft. They're just like, I've given up. If your company uses Microsoft for their email, I'm going to send you WhatsApp or something because I can't get email through their firewall and I've given up trying to get it fixed. How many of you have Slack installed? How many of you have Teams installed? And Discord, and Signal, and Telegram all installed on all your devices all the time because you got that one friend who uses Telegram because they are really, really security conscious. And you got the other friend who's also really security conscious, but they use Signal because they think Telegram is owned by the Russian mafia. And you got the people who use Discord for their work chat because all the others are too corporate. And you got the people who use Teams because they work at Microsoft or because they work with someone who works at Microsoft. And you got to have Slack because everyone's got to have Slack because I'm in 43 different Slacks right now. You ever had anyone here ever had a Zoom call with someone who works at Amazon? No, you haven't, because Amazon do meetings on Amazon Chime, because that's their video chat platform. And if you want to talk to the people on these platforms, you just have to suck it up and install them and run them. There is no way that I can use my Zoom to call your teams and we can have a chat, because it's the same thing, right? It's video and audio and screen sharing at both ends, but there is no standard, there is no protocol. We are consolidating on channels controlled by multinational trillion-dollar corporations. Now, if you go on Reddit, at the moment, Reddit's a website. Reddit is a website that only exists because of the web. It's a website aggregator, and Reddit is now owned by Condé Nast Publications, who own Vogue and a whole bunch of other things. And if you go on Reddit's website on your phone now, it says, hey, do you want to see this in the Reddit app? Big blue open button, yay! Or little gray continue in the browser, like a loser. And you're like, no, browser's fine. And it's this page looks better in the app. And you're like, no, I'm good, actually. The app has unlimited cats. No, I'm a dog person. Oh, no, the app has unlimited dogs. And then certain kinds of content. For some reason, Windows error messages are considered not safe for work on Reddit, because I tried to open one, and it said, yeah, you need to use the Reddit app to browse this anonymously, because you don't want anyone knowing you've been looking at blue screens of death on there. Now, why do you think Reddit is so desperate that you don't use their website? It's because, one, if you're using that app, they can track you. They can track where you click, everything you open, everything you do. You can't install an ad blocker on the Reddit app. If you're using a web browser, you can block ads. On the Reddit app, you do not have that control. Now, last month, this guy, Felix Krause, he published this really interesting thing. It's called inappbrowser.com. And what it does, you share a link to this on Facebook or YouTube, anything where you have a mobile app that opens all its web links in its own browser, which runs as part of that app. If you click a link on Facebook Mobile, it doesn't open Safari. It opens a browser that's part of Facebook's app, and it injects JavaScript into it so that they can track things that you don't know they're tracking, because everything you do that started from that link is being mediated by software that they control. Now, this convergence, this tendency to move away from open platforms to closed ones, is, I think it's probably inexorable. I don't think we can turn the clock back on this one, and people do it because it's convenient. And it's easy, and most of the time, for most of the people, it works. I arrived in town the other day. I was like, right, Thursday night after the party, let's say we can find somewhere we can go and listen to some music, have some beers. So I went on Google, and I looked up, rock bars in Oslo, and I scrolled down a little bit, and I go past the TripAdvisor and the Yelp and everything, and I'm like, oh, this is good, the Rock Inn. Yeah, more metal than you can handle. That sounds like my thing. I click on it. It's Facebook. They don't have a website anymore. What's the point? They have a Facebook page that does everything they need in terms of, we're here. This is our menu. These are the bands who are playing. This is the Slipknot release party that is coming up. All this stuff is there on Facebook. Now, if Facebook decide they don't like the Rock Inn, this company disappears from the internet, and they have no presence anymore. But that's not something they're worrying about, because the alternative is they have to pay someone to maintain a website, and they got to run the WordPress and pay for this and update that and do all the things on too many platforms. And so the convenience overwhelms the openness and the transparency, and we end up converging on platforms. There are whole companies out there now who run their business through WhatsApp. And yeah, that, fine, it works. You can deal with customers. In India, WhatsApp for Business is absolutely massive. You can book hotels on WhatsApp. You can order takeout food on WhatsApp. And it's absolutely fine unless they decide they don't like you, or they accidentally screw something up really, really badly. In October last year, Facebook vanished for 6 hours. Facebook's entire network, which took down Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook. And there are people in the world who never use anything else on the internet. Facebook, Insta, WhatsApp, those three things disappeared. They think the sky is falling. First of all, there is a massive spike in DNS traffic from everyone's browser going, oh, that's interesting. Facebook's not there. Let me check I got the right records. DNS spike. About a minute later, there's a massive spike in traffic on Twitter and LinkedIn of people going, ha, Facebook is down. It took them about 6 hours to get back online. What had happened is somebody had deleted, there was a thing called the Border Gateway Protocol, which is how the hardware that makes the internet work knows where to send the packets. When a packet gets to the edge of my network and it needs to find its way to your network, this is way below TCP, IP, and IP addresses. This is the kind of fundamental routing and plumbing that drives the internet, which powers the web. Somebody at Facebook, apparently they went to inspect all of the routes into Facebook's network, and instead of inspecting them, they deleted them. Now, this was a problem. People who work for Facebook use Facebook email addresses, fb.com. They use WhatsApp. Well, WhatsApp's down because it's owned by Facebook. They use Facebook Messenger. Well, Facebook Messenger is down. All right, I guess we'd better drive down to the office and see if we can figure out what's going on. They can't get into the building because the keypads on the doors use the same authentication system as everything else, and it's down. The server that lets you open the door is not on the internet, and so you can't even get into the building where the server is to reboot the server and reinstate the protocols and get the thing connected back up again. Eventually, they either found someone with a key or they found someone with an axe, and they got back in, and they managed to get Facebook and Instagram and everything back on the web, but the whole thing was dark for about 6 hours. Now, the way that they coordinated getting it back online was they had to use text messages. And they had to make telephone calls, and the people who still had a backup email address, which was not a Facebook address, had to fall back to using that. Open standards, open communications protocols, which were not controlled by the company they all worked for that had just accidentally locked all of them out of their own jobs. Now, I was thinking about all this stuff around the same time. Facebook having to use their old Yahoo email addresses to get stuff back online, and DylanBeattie.net getting blacklisted by Google. And while this is going on, something kind of drifted across my radar. You remember this picture at the beginning, where we color-coded all the bits of the world according to how you get internet access there. And there's this little gray area down the bottom, the white continent, Antarctica. Turns out internet access in Antarctica is unbelievable. Now, if you look at the world from below the South Pole, it looks like this. Antarctica, that's the South Pole, that's a South Polar orbital view. Now, in most of the world, there are no cables running to Antarctica. The only way that Antarctica can talk to the rest of the planet is by satellite. And most of us who use satellite internet in any capacity, we get it from the geostationary satellite network. Now, these things orbit 65,000 kilometers above the equator. You can't see them from Antarctica because you are so far south that they are below the horizon. They are below the line of sight. Has anyone been watching For All Mankind on Apple TV? Absolutely awesome show where the Soviets were first to the moon and the space race just keeps on unfolding, and you're watching it, and I'm sitting watching that and thinking, well, that's cool, and that might happen, and that's plausible. And then I get to this scene. I'm like, no way are they doing video conferencing from McMurdo Station. Like, you missed the episode where you showed us how they cabled Antarctica. McMurdo Station is a real place. In summer, there's about 5,000 people there. In winter, that drops to about 1,000. And if you've seen that Kurt Russell movie, The Thing, it's that. It's people stuck indoors through the Antarctic winter. It is dark, it is cold, there is nothing to do. If you go outside, you'll probably freeze to death. You're like, yeah, it would be cool if we could watch Netflix and stuff. Well, you can't. Because the satellite internet that you get in Antarctica, for about 9 hours a day, you can get the interplanetary relay network. This is the satellite network that is used to communicate with the International Space Station and occasionally with the space probes that NASA has sent out. And when it's in the right place, you can see it from McMurdo. So they get about 25 megabits of bandwidth shared between 1,000 people. When those satellites are below the horizon, your only option is this. This is the Iridium satellite network. There are 66 Iridium satellites. They are in low Earth orbit, about 780, 800 kilometers up, and they provide satellite voice and data services anywhere on the planet. Anywhere you go, you can connect to an Iridium satellite as long as you can see the sky, and you can make phone calls, and you can send email. To send one email on the Iridium satellite network costs about $3. This is not a streaming solution for watching Netflix in Antarctica in the winter. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, imagine if you were in Antarctica, you spent $3 to send someone an email, and it went into their junk mail folder because Google doesn't like your face. And I thought, hang on, what if we flip that around? What if instead of the whole you got to pay to send email and then it goes to junk mail, what if we could pay to send email to guarantee it didn't go to junk? What if there was a way of saying this email is important, I am going to give you money, and you are going to deliver it. Do you understand? And the internet went, yes. Now, we're going to have to go back in time, because I think there is no way we are going to be able to make this happen starting from where we are now. But maybe if we'd had this idea back in the 90s, because back in the 90s, everyone was like, email's amazing because it's free. But the other amazing thing that was happening in the 90s is Nokia phones had been invented. And when you got your phone contract in the 90s, you understood that text messages cost you money. You would get 50 free messages with your contract, and after that, you would have to pay 18 cents a text message or something. So we had almost established this expectation that you should pay to communicate with people. So we're going to go back in time in our DeLorean. We're going to retrofit SMTP. We're going to figure out how to fix some of the things that we should have got right the first time. The way internet email works is that the sender wants to send an email, so they go to the DNS infrastructure, and they go, hey, tell me, who handles email for dylanbeattie.net? And DNS looks up a thing called an MX, Mail Exchange Record, and it says, oh, send it here. Send it to mail.dylanbeattie.net. And then the sender looks up the IP address. It connects to mail.dylanbeattie.net and says, hey, I got an email here from /@gunsandroses.com. And mail.dylanbeattie.net goes, ooh, cool. All right, yeah, send it. That's fine. Is it / I don't know. We don't know. It might be, might not be. We have no way, there's no protocol in here of determining whether that is actually what it claims to be. But what if the sender went, hey, who handles email for Dylan Beattie? Gets back mail.dylanbeattie.net, sends over there, hey, I got an email from /@gunsandroses. Here is the message ID. And my server goes to the DNS, hey, I got an email that says it's from Guns N' Roses. Can you check this? Who does DNS for Guns N' Roses? It sends back, oh, Guns N' Roses email server is called Beatrice. Don't know why, it just is. And then my server goes to them, hey, did you send this? And they say, yes, we did. And I'm like, woohoo, I got actual email from /. Or more likely, it says, nope, and I did not get actual email from /. I got this guy. Now, All of the technology necessary to do this has existed for 25 years. It's just that's not what we are using it for. The green padlock in your browser, the SSL certificate, these days, we only use those to verify that traffic has not been intercepted in transit. I had to get an SSL certificate in 1997, and I had to send legally notarized paperwork confirming that I had the right to the domain that I was registering the certificate for. Today, I could go on and I could buy NDC Oslo Norway.com, which is probably available, and then within 10 minutes I could have an SSL certificate confirming that that's definitely me, and I am NDC Oslo Norway.com, and everyone would trust it because your browser would go green because we just use SSL and HTTPS to confirm integrity. We've given up on using it to confirm identity, but we could do that. The technology exists. We have certificates that trust other certificates, that trust other certificates, and we could potentially build a way of using DNS and SSL to prove that the domain comes from the person you're actually sending it to. So imagine I want to send you an email, and I really want you to open it. In fact, like I said, I'm so desperate, I will pay actual money. So I'm sending Big Shot Lawyer from Dylan at dylanbeattie.net. These are the really important legal documents. This is a priority paid level 1 email. It's worth 50 cents. The mail provider, sending mail has always been a problem because people don't want to pay for it. If every email that went out was attached to, say, 1 cent's worth of value, running reliable SMTP relays would be a profitable business in its own right. You wouldn't need advertising. You wouldn't need billing. You're just like, yeah, you send us email, we'll give you 50 free emails a month. After that, you have to pay. You want to invite all your friends to your birthday party? Yeah, it's going to cost a little more. You want to send 1 million people an email advertising Viagra? We'll pay up. And you're like, actually, I don't sell that much Viagra. I'm probably not interested in using email here. And all of those microtransactions that are being sent with the emails, they just end up accruing on the remote side. I send 50 cents, and my lawyer gets an email going, hey, Dylan sent this, and by the way, if you read it, you'll get the 49 cents that was left after. Imagine getting money to read your own spam, right? Technically, it's not that unfeasible. The problem is, you end up with all the people who want to play Wordle have emailed their dollar, and suddenly play@wordle.com's got $187,000 in it, and the account balance has suddenly done this because it's gone viral, and you're thinking, well, how are we going to get the money back out? Because the question here is, well, how do we turn it back into actual dollars? And maybe this is a mechanism we would have needed to consider. Or maybe we could have done what, if anyone was in my talk earlier about mobile payment systems in Kenya, maybe we're just like, you know what, email is currency now. You see the thing where you go on a Slack and you want to sign in, and instead of a password, it just sends a thing to your email, you click on it, that links back to your browser. I like this idea of if you want access to data or services, the endpoint server that you're connecting to, instead of you going, hey, I've got a username, I've got a password, it's like, well, hang on, I'm going to go via another channel, and I'm just going to confirm via the back channel this is actually you. So it's 2 factors. You've got your browser, you've got your email. Email as a way of doing this kind of sucks for a lot of reasons, not least the ones we're already talking about. But I'm sure you've seen, you ever go onto like Argos website in the UK, they're a, retailer, catalog store, and you go on there and you're like, hey, I want to find my nearest Argos store. You click that, and it says, this website wants to know your location. Now, this to me is where the balance point is tipped over. Argos would love to know where I live. They'd love to know how much money I've got. They'd love to know what I'm interested in. When is my birthday? Who are my friends? They don't want to know where I am because I'm moving all the time, and that data would be an absolute headache for them to manage. And so at this point, it becomes too expensive for them to manage that themselves. They just ask my browser because my browser probably knows the answer to that question. Let's take this model, stretch it a little further. You go onto Amazon, and you get there, and it's like, hey, we want to sign in as Dylan Beattie and access your delivery address. They don't need to know where I live. I know where I live. My browser is allowed to know where I live. My internet provider, maybe my government is allowed to know where I live. We can use data exchange based on these services instead of every company you ever do business with having copies of all of your personal data. But then what about this? What about Amazon says, hey, I'll give you $1 for your browser history. I want to know what you've been looking at. Yeah, is that worth something? And we're like, yeah, go on. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll click allow. The $1 goes into my email account managed by my internet provider, and Amazon can see my browser history. They can see where I've been. And there are possibly people in the audience right now going, yeah, and we can do it, and it's going to be amazing, and we're going to do it all using blockchain. No, we are not going to do it all using blockchain. This is the only blockchain that I would consider investing in. Now, there is a lot of excitement at the moment about distributed autonomous organizations and DAOs and non-fungible tokens and NFTs and cryptocurrency and all these kinds of things, the metaverse. And a lot of the people who are talking about this say they are working on Web3. Now, I'm sure you all followed the massive hype in NFTs, non-fungible, basically digital artwork. NFTs were all the people on the Ethereum blockchain going, we need to get more money into this system because the smart people have taken the money out the other side already, and we're left holding the pretend internet dollars that aren't actually worth anything unless we get real dollars coming in. Are there any stupid rich people in the world? And they look at Los Angeles and they go, come to Papa. And they're like, who wants to buy a monkey for $20,000? This picture cost $20,000. And what I did is I right-clicked it, and I went Save As, and now I have the monkey. And the best part is that I did that when I was in Romania, so I'm an international art thief. So that's definitely worth something. A lot of people spent a lot of real money on non-fungible tokens of Bored Apes and all kinds of stuff. And yeah, this was a mechanism designed to get currency pouring into the Ethereum blockchain network so the people who were holding Ethereum could use that money to cash out and disappear before the whole thing came crashing down. And did it? Well, Jack Dorsey's first tweet was sold for $3 million, and then the person who bought it tried to sell it for $48 million, and the maximum bid they got was $280. Now, maybe it was just a bad week for buying tweet. By the way, you know how to sell a tweet for $3 million? You find someone really rich and stupid, and you go, psst, you want to buy a tweet? And they go, all right. And they give you $3 million, and you go, there you go, you have a tweet now, and you hope nobody asks any questions. That's basically what it boils down to, you know. Now, there are some interesting ideas around things like non-fungible tokens, but Web3 is just kind of rattling around in search of a definition. The one that I'm enjoying the most at the moment is from Odin's talk this morning. Web3 is a pyramid of dumpster fires. And there is a fantastic website run by the awesome Molly White called Web3 is Going Great, which is an aggregation of news stories about fraud, crime, bankruptcies, people who have lost money. And in the bottom right-hand corner of Molly's website is a thing called the Griftometer. And as you scroll down web3isgoinggreat.com, the Griftometer goes up. And every time it has a story that someone lost a whole bunch of money, it counts up how much money they lost. And if you scroll back, all the great things that have happened on Web3, as far as April this year, you get up to around about $1 billion that has been lost through things saying, we are Web3. But that's the thing, you know, the whole thing about Web3, we don't know what it is yet. We think we know what Web 2 is. Because looking back with hindsight, we have decided that Web 2.0, Web 1.0 was the first web, where, you know, smart nerds with FTP access can make websites and everyone else just has to shut up and read them. And then Web 2.0 was social media platforms. It was where you could put your own stuff. You could put your pictures on Flickr. You could put your stories on Facebook. You could have live journals and MySpace and Bebo and blogging and eventually Facebook and Twitter and all these kind of platforms. It went from being the read-only web to the read-write web. And in retrospect, people are sort of like, yeah, obviously that was Web 2.0. But I was there when they were building what became Web 2.0. I talked to people who were like, yeah, Web 2.0 is about microformats. That's what it is, little snippets of XML embedded in web pages so search engines can read them. No, Web 2.0 is the semantic web. It's about HTML tags that have meaning beyond just what the page looks. No. Web 2.0 is Ajax. No, Web 2.0 is RSS feeds. No, it's not. It's Atom. No, it's XML. No, Web 2.0 is SOAP and REST APIs and blogs and customer reviews. All the people who were building these things all said they were working on Web 2.0. And in hindsight, yes, the ones who were working on microformats, well, they're still working on microformats. That's Web 4.0 now. Ajax, that's just part of the web now. No big deal. Like websites you can drag and drop and they just load more stuff. That just turned out to be Web 1.0. We really should have put this in the first place, right? Blogs, Atom feeds, RSS feeds, these were all really big for a while, and then the social media platforms came along and consolidated it down. I have deals with a bunch of my friends that when they get everyone to read blogs again, I'll stop posting on Facebook, and no one's taken me up on it yet. And some of them just kind of disappeared. You know, the semantic web looked like a good idea. But the people who were working on this, the people who said they were working on Web 2.0, some of them were out to get rich. Some of them were just trying to ride the wave and get as much money as possible. But a lot of them, they were looking at the frustrations of Web 1.0 and thinking, how can we solve this? How can we use the technology and the connectivity we have at our disposal to make this better and make this more inclusive and make people feel more engaged with it? And so I think 10, 15 years' time, we are going to look back and we are going to identify something and say, yeah, that was probably Web 3, that thing. Now, I don't know yet what that is, but there are people I know who are working hard for good reasons about things like artists getting paid for their work, even if it's been distributed digitally, about people who want to create more immersive collaborative spaces than just sending Slack messages to your coworkers backwards and forwards, about people who have sort of looked at the revolution in remote working and remote networking that's happened during the pandemic and are going, yeah, maybe there's an opportunity here to do something more interesting. And yes, there are words like metaverse and NFTs and blockchain bouncing around all over the place, because at the moment, that's where a lot of the investment is happening. If you want to do this stuff and you want to get paid for it, you can't really sell anything yet, so that's what's going on. But maybe we are going to look back on Web3 as the point where everyone went, you know what, we're not going to accept the terms and conditions anymore. We want to do the things we need to do. If you build a good product, we will pay you for it. We want to get paid for our work. We want to get paid for our open source software. We want to get paid for our music and our art and our movies. And let's come up with a way of doing that that doesn't rely on multi-trillion-dollar corporations channeling all that stuff backwards and forwards. If you want my money, build a good product, and I will give you my money in order to use it. But until then, give me an IP address and get the hell out of the way. Thank you.